instead of me training technicians, how do we train you to train your technicians? How do we actually start to look at your own leadership and your own personal development and your own growth? Why am I teaching people how to communicate more effectively when they don't even understand their own subconscious desires and intentions that are getting in the way of them being heard clearly?
I think sometimes it's okay to understand that you are going to get things wrong and you're going to slip up, and being vulnerable and honest and actually owning up and admitting these things as well. I think they're like good traits as a leader that you will develop. April 3 and 4, 2025, World of Titans is hitting Sydney. World of Titans is an event put on by ServiceTitan, and they are bringing out some of the most famous and well-regarded speakers in the trade space, including Keith Mercurio, Ellen Raw, Ismael Valdez, Catherine Elizabeth, Tom Howard, and now even homegrown Scott and Vicky Irwin from Network Plumbing. Guys, you've got to check this event out if you're serious about growing your business. And if you've ever had the opportunity to visit any of the events in America, you'll know what I'm talking about. These are amazing, and they are bringing this event to the shores of Australia for the first time ever. Stick around to the end of this podcast. I'm going to give you some more details on what is happening and where it's all happening, and I look forward to seeing you there. Ciao. Yeah, Auntie Ellen, the wonderful Auntie Ellen, has introduced us in the lead up to this amazing event that's going to be happening out here. The ServiceTitan event coming up in April, and you, of course, are going to be joining us on the shores. And I'm guessing that you have been here before.
Yeah, and it was 2002. 2002. I lived there for 6 months.
Oh, where were you?
So I started out in Surfer's Paradise.
Okay,
yeah, I remember my dad, on the Gold Coast, my dad said, he said, "Are you sure that you've already decided on the right place you want to go?" I said, "Dad, it's called Surfer's Paradise. What else do I need to know?"
Right.
And then I got there, and it could have been anywhere in the world. I might as well have been in Miami. And it was like, I didn't fly across the world for this. And so we were on a day trip, and we ended up around Byron Bay. And I took one look around there, and I said, "What's the nearest school to here that I can transfer to?" And it was Southern Cross University in Lismore. Yeah. And so I got myself, I squared away all the paperwork. I was 19 years old. I transferred to Southern Cross University and proceeded to live in Lismore for a stretch.
You're a lesbian.
What's that?
It makes you a lesbian.
I made it through the entire time without hearing that.
If you were in New Zealand, that would mean something different altogether, but we're not.
Well, this is great. Well, let me tell you something about the people of Lismore. Lovely people. But, and I don't know whether this bodes well for them or your countrymen at all, but there are these meter markers on the side of the road to show you how deep the floods were, right? Because there's a river in Lismore where they would, back in the day, they would clean cut the rainforest and then float the logs downstream when the river would flood. Great plan, whatever. You can have your comments on it environmentally. But to then build a town in that same place that floods every fucking year is just it's like, these are not your planning people.
Yeah, no, they're not they're very good swimmers. That's one thing. They got absolutely torched a couple of years back in the floods. Poor old lesbians. But yeah, I'm right near there actually. I'm in between the Gold Coast and Byron Bay.
Whereabouts?
Kingscliff.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I used to hitchhike my way to whatever break I could from Lismore. I had no car, just my surfboard. Yep.
You're a fellow surfer.
Yeah, well, I'm a lousy surfer, but I love to surf. So yeah. It's pure joy. But no, I had like the ultimate Australian experience. I actually worked in a koala hospital rehabilitating koalas when I was over there.
Is that at Currumbin?
What's that?
At Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary, was it?
It was the one that was attached to the school.
Okay.
So right there in Lismore. And you got the flying foxes over there that would take flight every night. Look, this might not be interesting for your own Aussie listeners. Maybe they're fully aware of this, but these stories never got old among the Americans. Like flying foxes that's an insane creature to have living just in your town.
And it's locals, mate.
My favorite part of it being that they would, they would take flight with like these, they'd pick up like a fruit, and a mango, and they'd take flight, and they'd get up like 30 feet in the air and be like, oh, this thing's too heavy, and just drop it. And you'd just be walking down the street, and suddenly there'd just be mango like crashing on the, car next to you.
I mean, I'd prefer the mangoes dropping at our place rather than what else they drop. It's pretty hard. I mean, we're lucky here at the moment. There's a huge storm which is washing away all the bat crap, but yeah, there's a lot of that going on too. But yeah, oh, that's good. So you've got a bit of an Aussie tie there. So we'll be welcoming you back to the shores in April.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thrilled to come back, and many things I'm looking forward to. But from a food standpoint, meat pies and sausage rolls are the two things that y'all do better than anyone on earth, and nobody else makes anything close to them. And I haven't had one in 20 years, so I'm pretty excited.
I reckon there's a few hot spots I might be able to take you to, mate. I think we're staying in the same hotel at the event, so.
That would be great. And the other thing, of course, is to have a VB. Now, I'm curious what's your favorite beer?
Well, it's over here. There's a lot of sort of craft breweries, if that's kind of your thing. So a lot of people steer towards those, but I mean, look, VB is always a staple in the Australian diet. It's one of the 5 main food groups, that's for sure.
So it's impossible to get in the States. And I told Vahe Kazoyan, the founder of, I told him a story once about Australia. So one of the founders of ServiceTitan is Vahe Kazoyan. And I said to him, it's impossible to find VB in the States. And he said there's one way to inspire this man into action, and it's to tell him something is impossible to do or find, and he will just put everything else in his life aside. So about 9 months later, I got a 12-pack of VB in the mail on my birthday, with a note attached to it. And he said, you were almost right. He said, you were almost right. He said, I've never had a harder time finding anything in my life than I did finding you a 12-pack of Victoria Bitter. So,
yeah, it's kind of it's interesting actually. VB, they went undercover and entered it into a craft brewery competition a couple of years ago, and it won.
There's a reason I've never forgotten about it.
Yeah, they pulled the brown paper bag off it, and they thought it was a VB, and the judges, I think, almost shat themselves. But because it's got a bit of a connotation over here, right?
Of course.
But anyway, look, here's what it is. VB, it's a staple,
a classic.
So, mate, we're not here to talk about beer and surfing, although I definitely can spend some time talking about both of those things. I would love to know a little bit about your background, where you've come from, and some of the things that we're going to be talking about today on the podcast.
Well, there's a little bit of a connect there in the background, in the fact that I was a college dropout. At my time over there, academically was less than my most impressive pursuit, and so I came home with
I bet you did well in some other areas, though.
I came home with a lot of experiences and no college credits recorded, I think. So, yeah. So I ended up dropping out of school shortly after.
We'll continue that conversation offline.
As you wish. I'm happy to share with whatever audience. And after I dropped out of school, I became a plumber. And I started working as a plumber in Boston, and that was a beautiful pursuit. It was the opposite. My family was an academic family, and I was like the opposite of the American dream. I was like the first person not to go to college and go into the trades, and I had a really great run in my 20s, and I got into the business side, and then in my 30s, I got exposed to a training organization called Nexstar. And Nexstar Network we've got, there's certainly members in Australia who undoubtedly will be listening to this podcast, and they're also all over the United States. And it's 1,000 companies, give or take, of plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical residential background. And I became their director of training, and I did that throughout my 30s and spent that entire time training and building curriculums for the trades. So, from originally the frontline classes of service system and how to walk into a customer's house and create a conversation and put options together and increase sales and opportunities inside people's houses. But then built out all of the programs, which eventually towards the back half of my career became really deeply focused on the leadership side of things. And how do we actually, instead of me training technicians, how do we train you to train your technicians? How do we actually start to look at your own leadership and your own personal development and your own growth? And so I did that throughout most of my 30s. And that's where I met the great team at ServiceTitan along the way. And we partnered with them early in their career and their rise. And then eventually I headed out back in 2019 and started my own consulting, speaking, coaching organization called Ethical Influence Global. And that was an intent of really exploring this concept of, leadership being influence, but my desire to ask and answer the question, how do we influence people in a way that honors those people, in a way that serves those people, and doesn't use the traditional means of, authority, manipulation, coercion, bribery, and everything else that we all lean on as human beings without even necessarily knowing. And so that's the work I do, and I do that in partnership with ServiceTitan to this day. So I'm an employee of ServiceTitan as well as being a business owner and entrepreneur myself.
Amazing. So we've had I've had the infamous Tom Howard on the show a whole bunch of times recently. He did an amazing series with us. Then that guy just blew minds all over the place.
Yeah.
Many of those episodes still to be published, but they'll be coming out. They're all in editing as we speak. I've had Ellen Raw on the show. We've had Catherine Howard is coming on the show. Ishmael Valdez is coming on the show, and yourself. So we've pretty much had the whole suite of experts that are coming out here to grace our shores on the show lately. And I think the big takeaway I'm lucky in the sense that I've been to some of these events over in the North American market. I've spoken at some of these events in Vegas and things like that, and I've seen the scale of it. And to have the caliber of those events, brought over here to the Australian shores, I think is something that's quite groundbreaking. And I'm certainly looking forward to that because it's desperately needed. The scale of the conversations that we have with these guys like Tom Howard and Ellen Raw in relation to business is just mind-boggling, really. Like we seem to. I think that and this probably ties heavily into a lot of the things you do in the leadership space and empowerment and mindset. I think there's just a different mindset relative to scale over there and what scale could look like here. There's a few guys pioneering it over here. Some of them like Scotty and all these guys, which if you don't know, I'm sure you'll get to meet. But yeah, like it's very interesting, and I think for the listeners and viewers out there. Take note because like this stuff is coming, as Tom Howard says, like it's coming to Australia. It will be there soon. Like get ahead of the game.
I can't agree more. I think, what I imagine from what I've seen of sort of the current scope of the landscape and, in the trades over in Australia and, Tom, I work very closely with, as well as Ellen. Ellen trained me 20 years ago. When I was just an apprentice, having just dropped out of college, probably 2 years after my Australia experience, Ellen came in. And I like to tell the story that, we were all so skeptical of any outside trainers coming in. Yeah. And the first time that, we got introduced to Ellen, the common phrase was like, who the fuck is this? And by the time Ellen left, we were like, who the fuck is that? Like, it was like she was, just such an incredible, the ability to walk into a space full of skeptical, just dumb young technicians that, thought that they knew better and didn't want to hear anything, and then have us all so completely wowed with the experience. Like that really does speak to, what talk about a pioneer, what she's been able to do and why I still adore her so much.
Yeah, no, she did.
Yeah. And, when I think about Ellen and like where I was at that time and where our businesses were at that time, and then I, kind of hear what the current landscape is of some of the, not all, but like to your point, some of the Australian landscape over there, it feels like it's, about to have that same sweep that I got to experience the first time over here. And, that evolution inside the industry that really went from being a trades oriented industry that had businesses to being really highly run businesses in the trades. You know, that shift, and watching these guys that once sort of took pride in being rough and tumble and blue collar, now, you know, shift to being like really personally developed, educated, like business oriented. It was remarkable to watch. It was absolutely remarkable to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing here. There's that shift has been. I've sort of been watching that unfold for a while now, and that transformation, which I'm sure we're probably going to get into a little bit in this podcast, in the space of, you know, coming through the trades as a technician, if you will, which is what you essentially get taught, you know, while you're going through your college curriculum and your apprenticeships and all that kind of thing, and then, you know, that transformation into, like, as part of your growth trajectory into becoming a business owner, and then, you know, developing this asset and things like that. Like, it's stuff that, like, it's a journey that, like, typically business owners will go on if they choose to, at their own expense and at their own cost of investment in learning how to do these things. It's not the kind of they don't teach you this stuff at trade school. Yeah. They certainly don't over here. So, you know, it really becomes a point, I suppose, where that mind shift needs to take place, where you're like, right, if I'm going to be a business owner, I need to be a business owner, and it's a different mentality altogether.
I love that. Matt, I'm curious, from your perspective and having met as many as you have, like, because you're talking about transformation, and now we're really getting into the area that I hone in on. How would you say that most of the business owners in the trades identify over there, as far as what are they proud of and what are they resistant to, you know, from an identity standpoint?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, truthfully, like, we're kind of preaching to the choir on this podcast, because people that are watching this or listening to this are kind of the type of people that are in the mindset of, I need to improve various areas. I want to learn leadership. I'm going to listen to Keith, like, whatever it might be. Right. So I can tell the identity. I feel like in most cases, business owners within the trade space still like to have the identity tied to being a tradie, as we call them over here, or a contractor. Like, that never really changes in my experience. However, the ones that are, you know, sort of moving more into business ownership, they, like, that sort of starts the whole like entrepreneurial business growth mindset, which kind of pulls them away from the tradie mindset to a degree, as my colleague Matt says, you know, the tradie mindset, changing that. But then I still feel like they kind of want to associate with that. Like, that's kind of part of their identity. Even myself, like, I'm formerly a plumber, and I like having that as part of my identity. But, you know, now I've been running a digital agency longer than I was a plumber. So, I mean, it's always still part of my identity, you know? So I think, I think truthfully, the roots of it will sort of remain, but then as part of the storytelling process as to, you know, how you got from A to B, you know, that's where it becomes more interesting in the space of evolving skills and knowledge and, you know, smarts around how to grow a business and all that kind of stuff. And I think, like I said before, people that are watching this are already committed to that paradigm.
And I appreciate that. And committed to the paradigm I love, and what I hope that they're committed to within that paradigm is realizing that more and more, like, and you know, that there's no point of arrival. It's an ongoing, like, commitment to that growth. Yeah. And you know, one of the things that I always I think about is that your team. So what I watch a lot of leaders do is they reach a new point of enlightenment, a new understanding, a new belief about what's possible, what can be, and then they bring it back and they want to share it with their team, and they think that the team is going to level up to where they're at. But the reality that I witness is that your team will only evolve at the rate at which you evolve. And so you want to think of it more as a gravitational pull, that your ongoing development is what will actually create an orbit around you that moves with you. You shouldn't expect the team to be at whatever level of learning, understanding, and development you're necessarily at. You should expect that you're setting the pace for that growth. And so the minute that you think, okay, I've got it and I can, like, slow down on my own development, is the moment that you've now set that becomes the new stagnant, pace of the organizational growth. And so, I mean, I remember distinctly how much I wanted to hold on to the identity of being just a plumber, and how important that was to me, that I wasn't a salesperson, that I wasn't being expected to produce revenue. In fact, what I looked at so clearly was that the people that did that really effectively, that there must have been something missing in them ethically. And, for me, it was my first introduction to Nexstar, where I saw these business owners and trainers and leaders who were operating at actually what appeared to be a higher level of ethics, and also dramatically higher level of performance, before I even had the paradigm shift, the witness that, like, oh my God, this is actually possible. And not only is it possible to elevate those two things, but in fact, it almost seems that the people that are operating at the highest levels of ethics and integrity are actually outperforming everybody else. And that was the paradigm shift I needed to see to open up my world to even consider that this was possibly true. And so, I think so often as these, wherever people are at, like, being in that constant evolution and that constant witnessing of what's possible and what's next is what unlocks what's possible and what's next for us, and for those folks that are going to be, well, if we're lucky enough, that are going to be, part of our team and trusting us to kind of guide them.
Yeah. And I think that is why these events and why these podcasts and things are so important, because I think if people can understand and see that someone else has been there and done it, then it kind of paves the way for the next person to do it, and so on and so forth. And so I completely agree with that. And the whole concept around the development, it being a journey, not a destination. I can't remember who it was. It might have even been the infamous Mr. Al Levy who told me once, personal and professional development's like showering. You just got to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that. And if Al Levy said that, I think he might have slightly co-opted it from Zig Ziglar. I think Zig Ziglar's line was, I think his line was, well, no, it's slightly different actually. So it's fair, but it just reminds me of it, which is like, motivation is like bathing. We recommend it daily.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that premise of that ongoing, like, need to re-up and to enrich and to continuously be on that journey. Now, that said, man, there's danger in that too.
Sure.
There's a lot of danger in that too, especially if the work is constantly intellectual development. If it's all feeding the mind. I've watched so many now, including myself, who become so intellectualized and so focused on the logic and the getting smarter and the application and getting better, that they actually lose track of their sense of self and their own, like, human development, spiritual development along the way. And that's where I see people get really fucking lost. And I speak of that very personally because of the damage and impact it did in my life over the past few years. But I also see it in others, especially as these business owners are achieving levels of wealth that we never dreamt of, with private equity coming in and, suddenly people becoming 100 millionaires and 200 millionaires overnight. And, what I've also watched is that, those same people tend to think that they're $100 million smarter than they were yesterday too.
Right.
And then suddenly, when they don't have that same job to do the next day and they don't have that same identity anymore, they become very confused about what their actual worth is.
I know we see that a lot in the sporting arena, with, these, I suppose, up and coming stars that, overnight sort of become this, sign these huge contracts and more to the point, I think some of these sporting stars, especially over here, like we have a huge rugby and rugby league and AFL culture, and these guys that, their entire life has been brought up around this identity of, being an AFL star or a rugby league, superstar or whatever. They have an injury which prevents them from ever being able to play that sport again. And all of a sudden they just end up in this spiral downward, because they basically lost everything that they've ever really known. And so I think that's a really good point that I'd love to unpack that a little bit more, actually, if you're willing, and how you can sort of mitigate downfalls. And I'd also like to while I'm thinking about it, unpack what you were saying before about as a leader, you've got to pave the way. But then I want to know, importantly, how do you, like, while you're on that journey, identify within the organization and like which ones are coming along with you as part of the process?
So should we start there? Maybe
Go.
okay. How do you identify the ones that are coming along with you? So, I think that one of the most important pieces, as I've seen in my coaching, I've been hired by organizations at so many different levels and within and outside of the trades. Much of my work is outside the trades these days. And regardless, inside of an organization, when I see coaching or development being assigned to people, I know that we're in trouble. Most of all, when I see coaching or development being assigned to people without the leader at the top, the CEO or whomever, the president being the one who's most wanting to seek it, I know we're in serious trouble. In fact, I won't even work with businesses anymore that hire me to train or coach people, quote unquote, below them. So as far as identifying who's going to go on that journey with you, I think it's merely a matter of demonstration and invitation. So, for example, with me, if it's not the president or CEO reaching out saying first and foremost why they want to evolve, what they want to learn, what they want to develop, first and foremost, and then how they want to share it with the team and what they see for the team, then I know that we've got flipped priorities. They think that they get something that their team doesn't yet. And now if we can just get their team to get it, everything will be okay. Right? So that mentality, that tells me that this owner is still living in a space, this leader is still living in a space of, I've got something that they don't have. I get something that they don't get. And now I need someone else to help them get it. Right? And that's, that sort of superiority of intellect is a very dangerous way to be thinking. Mm-hmm. So I'm very cautious with people. If you think the team just needs it, like those are signals for you, like, no, it's actually, you're missing something, right? You're missing something within you. Now, maybe you don't have the right team. Maybe there's different people at different points in their journey that could make them not the right fit for whatever ride you're on. That's normal. We deal with that all the time. But if it's always the others, right? If we have multiple data points that it's always the others and these complaints that you have sound familiar to you, then that's your indication that it's a look inside. Mm-hmm. And so, it's demonstration first. Like, I want this, I'm going to seek this, I'm going to continue to grow in this way. And now I'm going to invite. It's demonstration, then invitation. I'm going to invite others into it with me. And I'm going to invite them in by sharing what I'm learning. I'm going to invite them in by sharing why it's important to me. I'm going to invite them in by sharing with them what I've been getting wrong. And in doing so, now I'm going to start to create space for other people to be able to step forward and say, hey, I'd be interested in that. Wow, I'm really seeing this growth. I'm really seeing this development. Is that available to me? Can I also be a part of this? What I typically see is that a leader, an owner, person, a human being, they get it, and then they want someone else to get it. And it's from a place of now a righteousness instead of like a humility. Like a holy shit, I can't believe how wrong I had it. Let me show you what I got wrong before. Instead of that, it's a, let me show you what I now know that I didn't even know yesterday, but I can't believe you don't know it. And so then they find themselves really not understanding what, like, oh, I don't know why anyone doesn't want to come on the journey. Well, the journey's unsafe. The journey's always about how much more you know, how much better you are, how much more you get it. And so now if I have to enter into that journey, it's a dangerous place. So as a leader, if you want to identify the people, you demonstrate humility and you invite others into the same humility of growth.
And like, how do you create like an ecosystem around that in the space of like sharing material or training or coaching or books, or like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
When you're trying to, so look, I read this amazing book here. You guys should read it. Kind of comes as an instruction more than like an empowerment. Such
a great, fabulous question. And can I just check one thing though? like actually check me on this. What I just explained, did that actually make sense? Like when I was describing the difference between the mindset of like, I've got this information now and you get it. I'm guessing from your question it did, but I want to check to make sure I'm not too like.
No, yeah, I did. I just want to kind of unpack it more, I suppose.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, super. I mean, super question. So practically, I think what you're directing me towards is like, what does the practical application of that concept look like?
Well, I'm not suggesting one way, but I just think
Yeah,
it would be interesting for, business owners and myself included. Like, I try and read a lot of books and listen to a lot of podcasts and do a lot of trainings and stuff like that. But then how do you empower team members to sort of want to embrace training methodology and mindset and things like that when, where it's not coming as an instruction, it's more coming as a, inspiration, if you want to call that.
That's great. It's great. Thank you for the thoughtful question. So, I think just like on the example of the book, right? Just, when you're handing out a book and saying, read this, I want you to get this, that's one thing. And you're right. It becomes an instruction. One, though, when you're demonstrating new learnings and you can say things like, I just read this the other day and it's making me think differently about this. What you're demonstrating, I loved your term of an ecosystem here. What you're demonstrating is inside the ecosystem, I'm constantly learning and realizing a new way to think about something that I thought about one way yesterday. Now I think differently about it. So that demonstrates to people that changing your mind, learning with new information, changing because you've got new information is in fact a way that we do things around here, right? Because what's the most toxic behavior that I see? I shouldn't most toxic. I have all these hyperbole. What's a very sort of toxic. I don't even like the word toxic for that matter. But what's not a
bad thing?
You know what fucking sucks is when leaders are constantly telling their team, I want you to make mistakes, but they never tell you what mistakes they're making. They're always getting it right, but they're telling everyone else you should be able to get it wrong. It's the same thing as leaders who are like, hey, I want you to, turn your phone off when you get home tonight and, not pay attention, or, if you're on vacation, I want you to disconnect. But then they go on vacation and they're connected the whole time. It's like, what the fuck do you want then? Because you're showing me one thing and yet you're telling me another. And so, just really becoming aware that telling people what you want from them or what they should do is not the leadership we're talking about. It's demonstrating it. So in that example, I've just read this. I've got this made me change my thinking on this thing we were talking about last week. Especially if you can find opportunities, Matt, where you say to this other person, I think you were right. I think you were right. Like, I think I was wrong about that. I've come around to your way of seeing this. Man, that starts to demonstrate like that this is how we operate here, that the best idea does actually win. And it's not just something that we've stenciled on the wall. Like, I really am showing you this behavior. Additionally, when you're in a conversation, in a one-on-one, and you show like this deep, loving commitment to people's own success and development, and something pops up and you go, oh man, have you read, Infinite Game by Simon Sinek yet? And no, I haven't read it. Okay. I think you would love it. That's different. I think you would love it. Not, you need to read this, but I think you would love it. I tried to run book clubs and all of that within leadership for ages and got the same lack of enthusiasm in the participation. But now I have people coming back to me all the time being like, hey, by the way, I read this, I read that. After you said this, I read that. And I'm like, no shit. And it's because there's no expectation. I'm just offering it up. I'm putting it out there and I'm inviting people in. I go, yeah, this book really helped me see this, or I think you might really enjoy this. When I tell someone, I think you'll really love this, it's because I think they do. But what that person hears is, I think you would benefit from the same things I'm benefiting from. Like, we're equals. Not you need this, right? It's instead I'm inviting them into it with me. So again, it's back to that premise of invitation.
So does that, Keith, do you think, tie into what kind of starts forming like culture around this sort of mindset and around this striving to be better sort of attitude within an organization?
Yeah, and I'd even be a little cautious of like striving to be better, because that strive for better it becomes dangerous, that people's worth is all about what they do. And same thing with like, I'm cautious about the idea of like always growing, even though one of the companies I coach, that's their value, and that's okay. But growth for growth's sake is not necessarily like a healthy pursuit, and always better isn't necessarily like a healthy pursuit. But that we live in like that we live in a state of being humans that are committed to like creating something really special for each other, like creating a place where we want to work together, pushing each other in a way that's meaningful, not to just hit goals that are, I mean, they're all fucking made up anyway. Like none of it, we're just making up budgets. We're making up goals. We're making up all of these things. It's a fun game to play in, but it's not, at the end, none of it matters. And that's what all these business owners find when they sell their business and have $100 million. And then they don't know who they are, because I don't have a goal to hit now. I don't have that next thing. And that's, I don't believe that that's what we were put here to and meant to do. I think it's part of it, but it's not all of it. So inside that.
Can I just question you on something here in relation to
Yes.
that? I mean, we talked earlier in the conversation around the importance of, personal development and, always developing, growth and improvement. Wouldn't that be the same thing? I mean, you're always trying to improve. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to tie back to turnover. Like, we're growing how? Personally, professionally, intellectually. Like, there's many different dynamics there that could tie into that value.
I agree. I take back my objection to it, at least the way that I articulated. I think that's a good distinction that you just pushed on. That I thought I heard you say always better, but I think the always growing part, and especially the way you just identified it, of like intellectually, spiritually, human, from the human perspective, like here's the part that I think I'm trying to articulate, is that
it doesn't have to be about money.
It doesn't have to be about money. It doesn't have to be about what's next. And it doesn't have to be about always improving. Like what I find, I've been coaching, for example, I've been coaching this one team for 4 years. All right. And that's a long time to be one-on-one every 2 weeks, like in ongoing. And as I've done that, I've just realized sometimes people need a break from being pushed to be better. Like some periods of our life are meant for contraction and some periods for expansion. And sometimes people go through really difficult periods where what they need isn't somebody to kick them in the ass to get them through it. It's somebody to let them be human and go through whatever they're going through and make it out. Before. And so that's what I think that's where there's so much of this, like always better, got to keep pushing, just that like constant up and to the right. And I just want to remind people of the willingness to have the human side of this development that has ebbs and flows as we hopefully move up into the right long term, but that it's not a linear, path.
Have you read Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, Total Recall?
I have not. I watched his documentary.
Right. He talks about in the book the 1%, and essentially like his whole mindset with, that he's transferred through his life full of all these different successes and things like that. It relates back to the micro improvements, which end up in seemingly macro results. And I know like within like my business, especially, like we do have always improving as a value, which could simply mean like what's something that you could do 1% better to make your life easier? Like, is there a tool? Is there a strategy? Is there a framework? Is there a SOP that you can create? Is there a team member we could bring in to help you do something better? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're like we're ruling with an iron fist and there's like a documented KPI based on what better is, but like conceptually the mindset around, okay, well, how can we strive to be doing something better, serving a customer better, getting a better result with a campaign we're running or whatever it might be. Like that mindset, like for us, is quite important.
So I wouldn't caution against that. Like, I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful premise. Um, like, to give maybe a practical example of what it is that I'm wanting to just to bring forth is like, look, I think almost anyone that you have on is going to talk about some version of constant improvement, evolution, development. Like, I imagine your listeners are very used to that, and that's a big part of why they tune in. And I don't think anyone in your audience like needs a kick in the ass per se, would be my guess. As you already identified, these are like ongoing developers. Maybe they do. Yeah. But like, man, I just came through a period of my life, the last few years. I lost my mom a couple of years ago. My dad had Alzheimer's. I lost him. At the same time, I was going through a separation and a divorce. I literally said goodbye to my wife from my dad's funeral a year ago, right? Like, lost my house. I'm losing, now I'm losing half of whatever I've earned and everything else. Brother, it was a dark fucking period. It was a dark period. And in that time, there were a few people that came alongside me and didn't expect anything more from me. In fact, they gave me permission to rest. They gave me permission to just be in the pain that I needed to experience. They gave me like the support of not telling me how I was going to get through it, or how, like, here's a tool that's going to make this better or easier, or here's what's going to take you to the next level. It was like, dude, what you're feeling makes sense. And how about this? How about we have no expectations of you as a business partner for the next, little bit here? Or how about, like, they would just even speak to it, like checking in to see how I'm doing along the way.
Sure.
Man, that shit was life. And it was a period of massive contraction for me. It was like the lowest of lows, and a dark and depressing period. Right. But now I'm coming to this other, well, I won't even say the other side, because there's always the other side that I'll go back, like, that's life. Right. But I just was so amazed by the people who were willing to, like, give me the space, the grace, the patience to rest, and how invaluable that was for now the next phase of growth and development. And so that's all I think that's the personal side. You were kind enough to share that this is one of our values. Well, on my side, like, what I'm speaking to is sort of the personal experience of, remembering there's like a soul and a spirit to be nurtured here too. And that if we're always pushing people to grow, sometimes we don't create a place where people can go through their ebbs and flows in life. And, that's part of it too. And
would you agree that period and that, part of your life that you just shared with us, has resulted now in what I see as obvious to me, but like, you have definitely grown and developed and improved, like, even the mindset around these things. Like, these have led to experiences that you now have strengthened as a leader off the back of these experiences.
Like, in ways I can't even begin to express. I mean, I was saying recently, like, I needed all of this.
Right.
And when I was in it, all I could, for periods, torture is, it was torturous. I was suicidal. I was deeply depressed. I was in a really dark place for months at a time, over years at a time. And I couldn't even imagine getting to the other side of it. I wanted out, right? Like, all I could think about was just getting out of the pain. I couldn't even think about getting through it. Now, on the other side of some of that, if I can be daring enough to even say that, I don't like to tempt the gods anymore. There's this part of me that I'm like, I needed that shit. Like, even the fact that we're having this conversation now, I never would have put this out there 3 years ago, 4 years ago, because I didn't understand it. I hadn't been through it. I just wrote an article today about the fact that I had, met this new friend of mine. And one of the first nights I met him, he was sharing with me how he suffered from depression and anxiety. And I had the fucking balls to tell him what I thought he should do to fix it. Motherfucker, I'd never even dealt with depression. at that point. And here I had the hubris to tell him what I thought. The irony would then come years later when I was in the depths of my depression and I couldn't even bring myself to do the very thing that I told him he should do during that time. And so now, as you say, have I grown? Like, yes, I think I'm in a period of massive expansion. But for me, what's interesting about the expansion is it's more about the capacity to be a little softer, a little gentler, less demanding of people, giving people more grace. And I'd like to believe that that's actually a beautiful leadership trait, but I don't know, maybe, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that could push their teams a lot harder and a lot faster. I don't know. But when I think about the whole experience of, I'll just finish it. When I think about the whole experience of what I want to create for other humans in this life as a leader or leadership coach, it's become a lot bigger to me than just the results in the business. Those still matter just as much, or they still matter deeply. But there's all these other parts that I've now been exposed to because of my own personal pain that I didn't have a true compassion for before.
You know what I'm like picking up on here is a level of vulnerability that perhaps has come as a result of the experiences that you've had in these areas, which is certainly a trait of leadership. Like it's being vulnerable and it's being okay having these conversations. And I think whether you realize it or not, I think it's quite an empowering trait that you're expressing here, because you're not trying to hide these things and you're speaking from the gut and the experiences that you've had.
Brother, if that's your experience of me, then I feel really honored. I've spent so much of my life, wanting to always demonstrate impressive traits and qualities and, creating followers by showing this is the way, look at me. And I think, again, the humbling of the last couple of years and how many things I got wrong and how much I managed to lose. The idea that somehow, that sharing in that for you is creating an experience of vulnerability, that's quite a compliment. That means a lot to me. So I hope, man, I hope that, that for, the people that for whatever reason give me their ears, that what they get to hear from me or in our conversation here, that it gives them some space to expand and grow themselves, or feel a little bit more heard or understood, or that this resonates for them for sure.
Here's a question for you. With experiences such as this, and even like not so much an experience, but perhaps a way of leading which involves being vulnerable and telling stories and that kind of stuff. How do you take an experience like that and parlay that into something that can be taught, educated, structured, so that people can go through something, and how do you communicate this to people, in more of a formalized arrangement?
So come to the event, because this is very much what I do from stage. Mm-hmm. So you'll see the most structured version of it that exists, which is like an actual in-audience experience. What's that?
Slideshows.
Yes, it's a PowerPoint. No, fuck that. There's a few slides, but no, man, so what's really fun about, I'll take a moment and because this is, I think, both answers your question and serves the other good of promoting what we're going to be doing. I've spent the last 20 years studying like adult education and learning, and how do we transform, like you use that word right out of the gates today. How do we actually help people transform and create lasting shifts in their identity and their beliefs and their way of being? And so the 90 minutes that I take with an audience includes some stories some science, individual work, participant work, and then me going into the audience live and coaching people live on the spot through what I'm hearing in their language and what I'm picking up on in their beliefs, and we do live coaching together. And so it's a truly extraordinary, like it's not a traditional talk by any stretch. And so I hope that the listeners here will be deeply intrigued to want to go and be a part of that, because it's yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, what popped into your mind there? What did you want to ask?
I was going to say, in lieu of people that are going to be coming and attending the event, and in your experience in the past, and I'm asking this because it's a loaded question, because I kind of know the answer, but I want to hear it from you in the space of at what point within an individual's journey, in your experience with all the people that you've worked with in the past and all your experiences, does that penny drop moment occur for an individual where they're like, okay, I'm kind of now willing to go on this journey of improvement? And what I'm mean is, it's super common to have that mindset where we're like within, and again, it's like when you go read a book and then you go read that same book 3 years later, and it's like a completely different book. You're pulling different things out of it because at that time you're open to different ideas and different concepts. And it's like it didn't even exist in the book the first time you read it. And I think as people, we go through stages or waves or cycles where, at some point we're not receptive, and at one point we become receptive, and then all of a sudden, when we're talking about here, especially with leadership and personal development, professional development, and all these kind of, concepts which we're sort of unpacking. Like, at what point in your experience, what's the penny drop moment? Like, if someone comes to that event, they're sitting in your session there, what's the ideal mindset of that individual? So they're like, right, I'm going to take something out of this and I'm going to blow it apart.
All right. So there's a few answers to this question, I think, that I've seen in people. One is the moment that they see something in someone else, or they see something in a moment and they say, I want that. Whatever that is, I want it. How do I achieve that? Because that's different than what I feel or what I can do or how I can show up. I want to show up that way. Like, how do I do that? Now, plenty of people will ask that question because they want to get there, but they aren't necessarily ready for the work that the pain, whatever it might be, that gets them there. But I see that one quite often. Like, whatever that is, I want that. And I'm not saying in me, I'm saying in whatever. It's something that they see sometimes it could just be one part of something that somebody exhibits, and they say, how do I become more like that? So that's one version where people suddenly enter into the work. The other can be when they discover that what they've been doing is creating enough pain in their lives or the lives of others that they're ready to make a shift. Like, the reason that we hold on to the way that we've done things is because it's the most comfortable, even if it's not getting us what we want. But it's the fear, of letting go of who we've been and what we're used to, what we're comfortable with, that prevents us from that next step. Well, the thing that motivates us past that fear is when the pain becomes so significant. Like, I just went through the period where the pain of loss was so significant that if I didn't sit with that and fully feel it and allow myself, then I was just going to commit myself to a lifetime of this, ongoing pain. And so, Tony Robbins talks about, the moments that create transformation, that a change in environment, continuous repetition, or number 3 is a significant emotional event, And so, people either identify ways that they aspire to and are ready to start getting into patterns to create those 1% improvements, or they're in some sort of pain or recognize something that's missing so significant that they know something dramatic needs to shift within them. Those are typically the reasons that I see people, being willing to enter into the work. At the event itself, it will be when I share with you the science and the story that connects with you, because I'm going to give you examples of things that occur for you that they're undeniable because everyone in the audience has the same human experience around it, and it's a blind spot that gets like suddenly unveiled, and you go, oh my God, I do that very thing. And then when we show you the ramifications of it, so I'll give you an example. So like one of the things that I'll talk about there is the science of how the mind absorbs information, and in that there's a remarkable mechanism that most of us don't know about, and yet every one of us should know about, called the reticular activating system. All right. So the idea here is that like what you focus on, you find, and what you focus on grows bigger, and what you focus on, you become. And when we're talking about focus, I'm talking about like the focus of the mind's eye, that which we think about the most. And so the mechanism that controls this is the reticular activating system. This thing, the conscious mind can only handle about 50 bits of data per second. Meanwhile, the non-conscious is absorbing 11 million bits of data per second. And this one little filter is the algorithm of the human mind. And it decides out of all 11 million bits of data, what are the 50 that are going to make it through? And the best example everyone can relate to on this is the last time that they bought a car, an automobile. They went out, they shopped for it, they decided on a make, a model, they started to investigate it and research it and look for it. And suddenly what started to appear everywhere on the road around them? Right? That very car. They notice it everywhere. And it's almost never the most popular brand of car. Whatever it is they drive, never the most popular. In America, the most popular car sold is the Honda Accord. Well, unless they're Accord drivers, they don't notice the Accords. They notice their one-off, Ford Raptor that is as rare as can be, but they notice that more often. Well, if we understand that this is how the mind works, non-consciously, that we are feeding and writing the algorithm of the mind. It's like if you suddenly put in a Google search and now all these ads are popping up for the thing you just searched for. This is how the mind works. Whatever we focus on, we are training the mind to find more examples of this. Now that's fun and light when it's about a car. But what does that become if what you focus on in others is their faults? What does that become if what you focus on in others is their selfishness? What does that become if you have an unconscious belief that you can't trust people? Right? What does that become if you have an unconscious belief that you yourself aren't worthy of a leadership role, or aren't worthy of being loved, or aren't worthy of success and wealth and whatever? What are the non-conscious programmings of the algorithm that are now causing you to see that shit everywhere in the world, and out of the 11 million bits of data, constantly let that information filter through to reinforce that belief? Right? So, just, can you believe that like we actually go through life without being taught that shit? It's fucking insane.
Well, and this is kind of what I was saying earlier in the conversation, where like some of these things are, these ideas, these concepts, these, frameworks, these whatever, like these are things that we have to explore and unpack on our own accord. Like these things don't get handed to you at any point of the conversation through any of, or my experience anyway, like any of the college curriculums or any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. No, you're so right. And of course, how late were we in the trades to start to, explore these premises of even business development? And then what happened for me was I thanks to, an ex-girlfriend, I got really interested in personal development and mindset work. And I remember going to my first, I like to say I like to join a cult every year and just fully immerse myself in whatever that personal development cult is for a while. But then I remember going to my first, it was Landmark was this particular one. And I was like, all of a sudden I realized like, this is what all of these business owners that I've been training actually need. Like what am I doing coaching them in new practices when they've got their own limiting beliefs and identity that are actually what are holding them back? Why am I teaching people how to communicate more effectively when they don't even understand their own subconscious desires and intentions that are getting in the way of them being heard clearly? And so that became my obsession, was like, how do I bring this world of deep personal development and identity transformation into the corporate and at first trade space, now corporate space. Like, how do I bring this into people's consciousness, and how do we raise the level of consciousness and how we're showing up to work every day and how we're showing up as humans? So that's where it came from, brother. I mean, you're spot on. And you're so right in the fact that you have to be ready to receive it. But before I go on stage, I have this mantra that this prayer, this mantra that I repeat over and over. But one part of it says that these people are in the perfect place in their lives for our paths to cross. And the reason I say that is that some will be there open and ready to receive, anxious for what I have to say. Some are going to be in there just looking at me, whatever, not liking my curly hair, or, that I'm too tall or not tall enough or whatever the fuck. And they're like, what's this wanker going to tell me that I don't already know? And that they're also in the perfect place for our paths to cross. Like, sometimes we think that because someone's closed off or not receptive, or whatever, that's not the right time. Well, no, it's not the right time for exactly that version of the message. But of course it's the right time for us to meet. Why? Because we met. Right. And so if I understand that everybody's on their own journey, then, it's not a matter of me getting them to see something differently. It's a matter of me just showing up and presenting to them exactly who I am in this moment, and letting them then make the choice. It's demonstration, invitation. And what I find, Matt, and this goes back to answer some of your previous questions as well, one which was left unanswered. How do we bring this into the space? Like, people are much more willing to learn with me and far more resistant to be taught by me.
Right.
And so when I'm sharing what I'm learning and what I'm getting wrong on a regular basis, not for any other reason, just to share it, people lean in. When I'm telling people what they should be doing and how they should do it differently, people tend to lean back.
Yeah. I think as well, I fell into this trap even yesterday with a team member where something didn't go right. And there was a number of things that sort of had been going on, and it all just compounded into me exploding and losing my shit. And in hindsight, and I know way better than that, but it didn't stop it from happening. And so, I think sometimes it's okay to understand that you are going to get things wrong and you're going to slip up, and being vulnerable, about, and honest, and actually owning up and admitting these things as well. I think they're like good traits as a leader that you will develop. And that's not a comfortable thing, to sit there and 1 second lose your shit. I mean, I'm a high D 40-point choleric, right? So that's like part of my fucking life. Like, this is the pros and cons of being a choleric, is you lose your shit regularly over things that you probably shouldn't, But anyway,
Matt, I knew that within
30
seconds
right?
of meeting you.
Correct.
I mean, instantly.
Yeah,
instantly,
exactly.
right? So I love that, and there's another layer to even explore within that, right? Because a couple of things that you said. One, I know better, right? I know better. Well, knowing something is the least productive state for learning something. So be really careful in this life, if we want to grow, of things that we think we already know. Because we all have these things that we know better. So clearly that isn't the reason. What we know isn't enough to get us to do something different. And so what I encourage people is, if they think to themselves, I already know that, or I know what I should be doing, or I know I shouldn't have done that, well, then there's something that you don't know within that that's causing you to continue to repeat it. And so then it becomes a matter of getting more curious. Like, okay, so if I just lost my shit, the reality is, no matter how much I want to point, and in fact, the more convicted I am that it had to do with them, or it had to do with circumstances, or it was everything else around me, the more sure that I am that it was them, the more certain I can be that it was something within me. It's always something within me. Always. Always. And so like in that moment, it's starting to take a look under the surface. Like, what was it about that moment? What got revealed in me? What deep fear, insecurity, frustration, like what was it that just got unlocked in me that caused me to have a reaction? Because a reaction means that something in my body took place that I don't fully understand because it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I can tell you this, it didn't make anything better. It just added an extra layer of shit on top that I had to clean up as well. Like, so, but anyway, I think I completely agree with that. And I found myself in so many situations over the years where I'm just like so amazed and truthfully kind of envious of people that handle situations like this with, you know, such finesse and calm. And, you know, and some of that is embedded into people's DNA and some of that has to be learned. And, you know, but on the flip side of that, I'm sure there's other things that happen within other people's, you know, lives when they see things that are being done on the other side of the equation where they're like, wow, I wish would be able to do that. And I think that's, you know, understanding that there's, you know, we have our strengths and we have our weaknesses, but all of these things we can, you know, we can stack the deck if we're just willing to learn these things. And I think that's kind of, you know, that's the leadership journey that I certainly find myself on. It's like, how can I be better at just, you know, not being this absolute fuckwit when these situations pop up?
So what happened? What happened yesterday? What was it that like, and what was your reaction to it?
Well, I mean, it was a series of things that happened, but essentially, one of my team members, who's normally quite, you know, he's great at what he does, but he deployed something within the business which fired off automations and all this kind of stuff, which it shouldn't have gone out, and it wasn't ready to go out. And so I just lost my shit at him for like, why did you let this go out? Now, part of that conversation is legit. Like, he shouldn't have let it go out, but then and the big part of that conversation is, well, why did I react like a little school kid, you know, like my 3-year-old, and throw a freaking tantrum about it when I could have handled it a lot better? And so,
perfect. You know, like great question. What's your answer?
There's yin and yang to this. There's yin and yang. I mean, there was a few things that were building up in the back end, and in hindsight, like I think I probably need to like step back a little bit more and like take more time to reflect on bigger picture stuff than getting caught up in the micro, like sort of focus a bit more on the macro. And, you know, and that's like an ongoing battle in I suppose my existence. But like,
yeah, well, so take a sec with it right now, because if you want, I mean, it's totally up to you, but like, if you look at that, right, if that reaction occurred for you, there's almost that's because some insecurity got revealed, right? Because like in the end, I'm going to guess that yes, this thing shouldn't have gone out. And also the reaction was disproportionate to the damage that was done. Yeah. Is that
right? Insignificant, truthfully, like, like we caught it early enough that it didn't make a difference and just blew up for nothing, essentially.
So good. So what I coach people on is when there's a disproportionate emotional reaction to the actual event, then that tells you that that's a trigger inside you. That's something, a fear, an insecurity that lives in there that led to a disproportionate reaction. Now, I already have a guess on this, but I'll hold on to that until you're like, maybe so you're to that answer. I think I have a guess on what that might be.
Are you talking about what the fear and what the insecurity might be?
Yes, because it was something within you that caused the reaction. It's not the actual event that took place, but rather what the event made you feel.
Well, I don't know so much how to answer like what the insecurity was per se, but I know straight away off the back of it, like I identified almost immediately after losing my, flipping my lid, that there was a lack of process there, and there was a lack of communication, and that was my fault. Like, I should have had better processes around that, and I should have had a better communication channel, with that individual, so that things like that don't occur. Like, we should have just processed and like these things out of existence, and that was my fault.
And that's a very, and by the way, that's the brilliance of the D in you that wants to immediately fix what caused the problem. But if you want to understand the reaction, and you should do that, like you should do exactly what you're going to do. That's brilliant. But if you want to understand the reaction, you got to look at like, that's an old belief that just got triggered that would lead to a reaction like that. So I'll just give you, it's probably something like you would want, like to the listeners out there, every single person can relate to this. Like when we suddenly become aggressive, defensive, somebody makes a joke, but we don't laugh at it. Like instead we get upset by it, whatever. It's because something in there just got, revealed for us to take a look at. And it's typically like, I wonder for you, like if there's a history of, like not wanting to look bad. Like, did that make you look dumb or incompetent, or, like, how does this reflect on me as a person, as an owner, as a business leader, but as a human being, and some old story in there that's like an insecurity around it,
maybe because like essentially what happened was it sent out an automation which made us look fucking stupid.
Yes. And there's something for you about looking stupid that probably goes back to when you were a kid, like a little kid. And that's like, because when a reaction comes on that fast, it's old.
Maybe. I can't pinpoint exactly what that might have been, truthfully, but I know like fundamentally that happened in the business and it looked stupid. And as the business owner, that would have been a reflection on me.
Right.
I mean, it's my responsibility to patch these holes up, right? Regardless of who makes them.
So for me, like, I'll share with you, like, one of mine. To this day, when I don't get invited to something, I find out like some friends went out, or there was a party over here, or there's an event over here, and I'm not invited. Even fucking literally events where I'm not invited as a speaker, I feel something like pop up inside me where I'm like, why aren't I there? And it's, dude, I'm telling you, it's like, it's not my fucking current 43-year-old emotion. It is the 7-year-old inside of me that watched my best friend walk out his back door, get in our other friend's van after he told me that he couldn't hang out. And I realized that they were hanging out without me. And like, and that shit was a wound, right? Like that shit was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess they don't want me as part of this. Like, I'm not good enough to hang out with them. And so to this day, like, I'll have that. So for you or anyone listening, when you've got something where you have that disproportionate reaction, if you really want to do the work, like the work, what I suggest is you go, okay, when was the first time that I felt stupid? When was the first time I felt stupid? Because somewhere inside of me, that's still a belief that I have that I'm now reacting about. Because logically, you look at all the success you have. There's no one that thinks you're fucking stupid. Look at what you've created. Look at the business you've built. Look at how many people listen to you, right? Logically, you've done all the things that should kill that. But somewhere the reaction comes from, I look stupid.
This is one of those things, isn't it, where you can have a million things happening in your life that are going well, and yet, like, for some reason, as humans, we want to focus on the two things that are not going well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Kind of like what you were saying earlier in the conversation, like, you fuel what you focus on, kind of thing. For some reason. Like,
yeah, so good. And you're going to focus on that because that thing in your non-conscious, in your identity, is more important than all the other things. Because typically, whatever those, look, let's look at it this way. So I got left out when I was a little kid. Well, what have I done? I've created an entire business in which fucking I'm constantly the center of attention, and hundreds, if not thousands of people are on the edge of their seat listening to my every word. So yes, it built all of that. Who's the one person in the audience I focus on? The motherfucker on his phone, right? Like, I can have 1,000 people in a standing ovation, but I can't take my eyes off this guy over here. Like, and so it's that stuff will drive us. But if you look underneath it, you'll find out also where the insecurity is, or that old shit is, that causes us to have the reaction. So when you said to me earlier, Matt, that like you do this is something that you repeat and you do it all the time. And like, if I could just stop being such a fuckwit, well, if you want to stop being a fuckwit, you're going to have to look back at like that, like, where did that old wound come? Like what inside, when did I first learn or come to the belief that I'm stupid? Or where was the first time that I felt where I felt like everyone thought I was stupid? Because that shit right there, that's where you can go and you can start to sit with it. And bit by bit, the next time that thing pops up and you start having that reaction, you're going to go, wait a minute. If I'm having this reaction right now, that's something old in me that just came up. It doesn't have anything to really do with this. Sure, there's a signal. Sure, I can do some work on the process. But if I'm really serious about getting to this place where I can still be an amazing driver and process orienter and business builder and leader and entrepreneur, but I can also not react in this moment. And now I won't have to fix a whole bunch of other shit that I'm going to light on fire because I have a reaction. This is like that's the up leveling of you as a human, you as a leader. That's the work to be done. Like, okay, what is it inside of me? Where did that just come from that I'm having a reaction? And then each time we get a little bit better, we raise the consciousness just a little bit, and we don't have the reaction. Maybe it's not as severe. Maybe it's not as long. Maybe we catch it quicker. Maybe we just slightly, just a second quicker, we stop it. Maybe we stop it, and in the moment we go, you know what? I'm really sorry. That was an inappropriate reaction. Let me take a minute and calm down, instead of finishing it and having to come back the next day to fix it. Like we notice it faster and faster, and then eventually, we start to work through that shit.
Yeah, I love it. Keith, I'm super grateful for your time today, man. I know we've been talking for a while now, and respectful of the time of day over there. We should probably get to wrapping this up. But before we do that, where can people get hold of you? What's the best places?
Oh, well, they can go to ethicalinfluenceglobal.com. But really the best place would be, come find me on Instagram, Keith Mercurio. Yep. Find me on LinkedIn at Keith Mercurio. Find me on Facebook if we're all of that age, on Keith Mercurio. That's I do my best to put out a lot of meaningful, just like content, just like what you heard here. And that would mean a ton to me. I'd love to expand the following and the reach. And if you love it, then love it and share it. That would be a real gift to me. So.
And as we've already touched on, you are going to be speaking at the upcoming event in Sydney in April 2025, World of Titans. So for you guys out there that have liked what you've heard and you want to get more of it, I definitely encourage you to come check that out. There's just going to be an amazing array of speakers there. I can't talk enough about it, but anyway, time sensitive, head across to thesiteshed.com where you'll be linked directly towards that page if you want for information on how to sign up and get along for that. And it is limited seats as well. So if you want to come, you better hurry. Keith, thanks so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it. It's been amazing. Is there anything you want to close on?
Yeah, I would actually. On just a personal note, I can't tell you how impressed I was with you and what you brought to this interview. Like the insightful questions, the deep listening, remarkable. And thank you. I probably, maybe I'm sorry if I pushed a little bit there. I have a tendency I love to go deep into the work with people. And I really appreciate your willingness to stay in that conversation with me. And I hope it was beneficial for you, but really impressive, Matt.
No, it was super beneficial, and it's making me think now. I'm going to go down after this and sit down and think about that for a while, because I think there's absolute truth in what you said. I'm just going to try and unpack it. And it's pretty timely, actually, because we've got our weekly meeting coming up with the team, in a few hours, and I'm going to sit there and run through some of those things I've just learned in this chat. So thank you so much. And I hope you guys out there also got something out of that. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, it was really impressive, man. Thank you. I'm excited to meet you in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you listeners out there, once again, head across to thesiteshed.com. You'll be redirected across to the event details where you can sign up for that. Otherwise, if you've got any questions, or if there's anything that you'd like to ask Keith, or we want me to unpack a little bit further, I'm sure I could rubber arm him and get him back on the show to explore some of these concepts a bit deeper. But
whether or not you want that would be the question, Matt. If you didn't even fucking sign up for this shit. I'm gonna say one last thing. I just wrote an article about not coaching people / pushing on people unless you know what they want. And then I just fucking did that shit where I started coaching you without even checking in. So I'm sorry. All right. I'm sorry about that. I was like, oh, there's something here. And I didn't even fucking stop to just be like, hey, would you be interested in fucking, actually unpacking that yourself? I could have used your very language. So
in fairness to you, you did know from the first 35 seconds that we were talking that I was a high choleric. So you knew that I was willing to take on feedback. So
there is that truth. That is part of it. And that you're absolutely right. And yet, had I just taken some of my own coaching and asked the question, I'd have felt a lot better about that. So that's the thing, man. We keep fucking, we forget and then we learn again. We forget and we learn again. We forget and we learn again. And so thank you for the grace to forget and learn again with you.
All right. That's a wrap. Site Shedders, I have an amazing time-sensitive announcement that you need to hear. On April 3 and 4, 5 of the USA's most accredited and accomplished trade business experts are bringing their expertise to Sydney to teach you how to build, run, and even exit your trade business in an exclusive world-first 2-day event. You're going to get to meet and hear from Tom Howard, who built one of his many businesses from 1.4 million to 140 million and is now preparing to exit. You're going to meet Ismael Valdez, who went from 0 to 30 million exit in 1 year, and he's done this repeatedly. We're also going to hear from world-renowned experts Ellen Raw, Catherine Elizabeth, Keith Mercurio, and our homegrown plumberpreneurs Scott and Vicky Owen from Network. For the VIPs, Thursday will include a tour of Sydney-based Network Plumbing's HQ, which is currently about 40 million revenue. There's going to be a Nail Down Your Financial Goals workshop with Ellen Raw and Tom Howard, followed by an amazing Sydney Harbour cruise. On the Friday, you're going to learn from the best in a jam-packed day with sessions from Keith Mercurio, Catherine Elizabeth, Ellen Raw, Ismael Valdez, and Tom Howard, who are all leaders in their relative fields. And if any of you, like me, have had the privilege of attending any trade-specific conferences, trade shows, seminars in the USA, you'll know what I'm talking about. There is simply nothing like these events. They are life-changing. And if any of the following points relate to you, you need to make sure you attend this event. You want to learn how to grow your home service business from 1 mil to 10 mil or from 10 mil to 100 mil. You want to overcome the mental roadblocks that are holding you back from reaching your dreams. You want to learn how to budget and become a first-rate financial manager in your business. You want to learn the formula on how to start, grow, and sell a trade business. You want to network with the best in the business. You want a tax-deductible excuse to work on you and your business in one of the most iconic locations in the world. So if that all sounds good, head across to thesiteshed.com, scroll down and click on the link to the World of Titans event and register you and your team. And I'll be seeing you there on April 3 and 4. Now, this is a very exclusive event. There are only limited seats available to this, and I can tell you now it's already half sold. So if you want to come to that event, make sure you get in quick. Don't muck around. I cannot guarantee there's going to be seats available for long. So it's April 3 and 4. Head across to thesiteshed.com and make sure you register for that event. See you there.